All right, what I'd like to talk about today is how to effectively learn from videos. You may watch videos, you may even get the same result as what the instructor is showing, but at the end of the day, you don't really retain the information. That's what I want to talk about. I've been teaching for 15 years, and I feel like I've been a student myself of absorbing tons of information, and I'm going to kind of show you the tips and tricks that I do to make sure that I absorb the maximum amount of information. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. If we look here, there's basically a 6-step process that I like to follow. Okay, the first is watch the video, but don't do it and don't take notes. Okay, now you can see that the retention rate, and these retention rates that I'm showing aren't exact science, but it's just kind of the general idea. So realize that the retention rate here is going to be very low, so at 5%. So if you stop at this point, you're not really going to understand it much. But the importance of it is to kind of get a bird's eye view of where you're going to go. So in other words, you kind of see why something's happening, you kind of get the whole process, and then I feel like it actually makes watching the video again less stressful because you're not worried about what you're going to click on next. Okay, so watching the video, just not worrying about every single click, just watching it, seeing what happens. It's kind of like you're watching a story, but you're not really concerned about the steps. Then you're going to watch the video again, and then here you're going to do it and then pause it, and then do it some more, and then pause it, do it, and then pause it. So you're actually kind of following along with the instructor. I think this is where most people start, but the problem with this is that if you start with this step, you don't even understand the big picture of why you're doing it. So in this case, you might end up with the same final result, but you're not really effectively learning it necessarily. Okay, so that's why I think kind of watching the big picture, seeing why you're doing it, then watching it again, actually doing it and pausing it, you can see that now you're having even more retention. But if you just stop here, you're really not going to remember it, and it's not going to be that effective. So now what I suggest is after you physically do it, now watch it again, but this time take notes. Okay, and if you think about it, you're kind of training your brain in another way. You're actually, the first time you're physically doing it, now you're taking notes and you're kind of remembering it a different way. Okay, now the next step, and I'm going to show examples later on of notes that I take and show you how to take notes, because I don't think it's necessarily easy to take notes, especially on very technical programs. So I'm going to kind of show you my method on how I do that. The next one is do not watch the video, okay? But try to do the techniques, try to do it again, following only your notes, okay? This will really show how good of a note taker you were, because I feel like a lot of times when I go to this step, I realize that my notes weren't kind of bulletproof, and I need to go and add something here or there. I feel like it's at this step where I can start to relax and say, okay, I've got this. If I need to repeat it again, I'll be fine. You can see that our retention each step of the way is going up significantly. The next one is do not watch the video, but do it, and this time do it without your notes. Okay, so if you can remember how to do it without your notes, now you're really forcing yourself to really think about exactly what you're doing. Okay, and ideally I would do these like back to back to back to back. Don't give too much time in between them, because you may not, if you gave it maybe a couple weeks between and then came back to it, you may not have, you may forget some things, okay? And I think with repetition, it's going to be easier to remember it. So here you can see your retention goes up significantly, okay? Now, the last thing that I would recommend is teach it to somebody else, okay? Now, you may say, well, I don't have anybody that would want to hear this. My roommates, they go cross-eyed when I explain this stuff. That's okay. You could get recording software and record yourself teaching it, And I feel like that also helps you kind of verbalize it and kind of think about how you are going to explain it. And now you're going to have the greatest retention. So you can see here, I think that most people start with step 2 and they skip step 1. And if you do that, I feel like your retention is even going to be lower. Okay. And then that's where they stop. But I feel like, I also think that it's not talked about enough that it's okay to watch a video more than once. And I think that a lot of people think, well, if I watch the video once, that was the answer. And I feel weird if I watch it again. So I feel like with my experience, what I do is I kind of go in with the assumption that I'm going to watch the video 3 times minimum. And then I'm going to do that exercise kind of 3 more times minimum without watching it. And I also want to point out this. Do exactly what they're doing in the video if possible. In other words, use the exact same shape, use the exact same, even the exact same colors, do everything they're doing exactly. I think a lot of times people want to jump to, hey, I want to do it with my own model, or I want to do it with this creativity. And what that does is it just slows down the learning process, because if something goes wrong, you don't know if it's because of a specific thing that you had, like on your model, or if it's that you're not understanding the concepts. So what you want to do is you want to have success first, and then try to apply that to your own model, okay? And kind of going through this 6-step process here. So let's take a look at this. So here is kind of, an example video here. And I can see that the first thing I'm just going to do is I would watch it and just kind of see kind of the whole concept. One thing that you could also do is, if you want to watch it, especially with this first time around, you could go here and you could watch it playback speed, even in double speed. Okay. Now in double speed, you're kind of, it's going to be obviously only half the amount of time that you have to kind of sit through it, but you're just kind of seeing overall, oh, I see he's adding colors to this gun, and I see that he's exporting it to Maya, and I can see that it's going to be a little involved. I see that I have to kind of keep track of a lot of different files. So in other words, I'm looking at it from a bird's eye view, and I'm not worried about every step. I think if I get too worried about every step right away, I get so bogged down in the specifics that I don't even understand where I'm headed. So once again, after I watch it with a bird's eye view, I'm going to put it back to normal speed. Okay, so here's normal speed. And now I'm going to start at the beginning, and I'm literally going to do it step by step. So if I had access to this model, or if I had a similar model, I would just do it exactly as shown, and then I would pause, and then I would repeat, and I would pause, and I would repeat. And I feel like that's difficult to get the whole gist of it, but I've already got the gist of it because I already watched the whole video. So now I'm watching it and pausing, okay? Then I'm going to go ahead and watch it again, but this time I'm going to take notes. And I feel like here's what my notes look like. So I like to use Google Drive for my notes. So for Google Drive, I just log into Gmail and then go to Drive. And then I can click on New right here, and I go to Google Docs. Okay, this is where I create all my notes, and I can see here's my notes. And now this might be one of the more challenging parts. So what I'm going to do is, when I'm doing this, let's say if I get to this complicated part where I'm connecting the materials, like over here, the part that's tricky with taking notes, especially on something like Maya or these complicated programs, is that you can't just say, connect the metalness map, because where is this, located? I feel like that's why I like videos. However, I feel like when you're taking notes, you have to kind of be mindful of that kind of stuff. So what I do is this. I walk myself through, and you can see how I have this set up where it's like I do a lot of indentation, and it's not very wordy at all. I try to have the minimum amount of words possible. And so, for example, here, I say right-click on object. So I go right-click, assign new material, AI standard surface. And now I can see here is the base. I can see base is right there. Here's specular right there. And then you can see that on base I have weight, color, diffuse roughness, and metalness. I write all that there. And same with the specular. I write all of this stuff here. Transmission. I even write all of these. I write all of these. Why? Because these are the ones that I'm plugging in. These are the files that I'm plugging in. I'm plugging in the base color, I'm plugging in metallic, I'm plugging in roughness, I'm plugging in opacity, and I'm plugging in normal map. Now, just the way that I wrote this, I can see that the color is here. Notice that there's color also here. I didn't plug it in there. I can also see that my normal map is going to be plugged in way down here. So if I would have wrote on my notes, plug in base color, metallic, roughness, opacity, and normal, well, then when I go back to it later, I might not be able to see or figure out where I'm plugging that in. So if I can kind of make a visual cue like I'm seeing over here, even though 90% of this stuff has nothing to do with it, visually I'm seeing it, how it's set up over here. Now, obviously, this is going to be different for each project that you have, but I feel like the more that I can kind of make this visually represent what I'm seeing here and organized it visually, the easier it's going to be for me. Okay, so then when I go through and now I don't watch the video and I try to replicate it strictly through my notes, it's okay if your notes are not good at that point. Okay, and then what you need to do is you need to go back and readjust the notes. And I'm like, oh man, for example, I need a starting point, so I had to kind of like put this stuff back in here and then kind of figured out, well, that wasn't very clear where that was located, so I had to make sure that I was in the right menu, and then I could find it. Okay, so now I'm going to go through that with my notes, and that's going to be a good test of, are my notes correct? Then I feel like, then I'm going to try to do it again without any notes, okay? And if that works, then I know that I've got a good, a really good grasp on it. And now let's talk about the last one, is this idea of teaching it. Okay, so even if you didn't have anybody to teach it to, you could get a recording software, okay? Camtasia, this is the one that I used. I can see that it is kind of expensive, but if you, I'm sure there's other ones out there, or even if you just recorded yourself like on audio, you could do that as well. And that's going to, you play it back, and I feel like if you can kind of like talk about what you're doing, that once again, it just helps you remember these concepts. So even if nobody watches your video, think about it as you have your own personal video for yourself that helps you remember it. So you're going to have notes that you wrote that are going to help you remember it, and then you're going to have your own personal video that you made of you actually doing the process that is going to help you remember it as well. And then what I would do is I would save that on the Google Drive on the cloud. That way, if you're at work and if you're like, oh man, I forgot how to do this process, I know that I have my notes. I know that I have my visual notes. I know that I have my visual screen recording. But all of that, even if you never access that, I bet you're going to remember how to do it a lot more. So does that take time? Absolutely. But is it worth it? Absolutely. So hopefully that was helpful, and let me know, message me if you have any comments or questions about this process. All right, thank you.